The Bennington School District Board of Directors meeting. It's 7:01, and the Jackies will be joining us shortly. Agenda item number 1, public comments. Are there? Actually, let me back that up. Yes. Do we need a motion to amend the agenda to include a discussion of the Southwest Vermont Union Elementary School District budget notes? Hearing none, we're going to move on to public comments. Agenda item number 1. Any public comments? Hearing none, we're going to move to the consent agenda, item number 2. Richard, I do have a correction to the minutes that I'd like to suggest on page 3, line 10. It discusses, I believe the line should be one of the first tasks of that board and not one of the fist tasks of that board. That sounds...
Spell check doesn't catch that.
No, that sounds, we like a kinder and gentler approach for the board than fist tasks. But with the addition of that, with that correction made, are there any other additions or corrections to be made?
On that page 3, line 36, my memory does not serve me correctly, but I thought I seconded the motion for substitute teacher pay, but I'm not positive about that. So if anyone else has recollection of that.
I don't remember.
But I don't.
There's oftentimes multiple people.
Yeah.
You and I, our names are often confused. So, okay.
Don't sit together.
Yeah.
Okay, so could I please have a motion to accept the consent agenda as published with the correction to the minutes as noted?
So moved.
Thank you, Jackie Prue. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Meredith. All those, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it passes. Moving on to number 3, the finance report. The treasurer's report from November was included, so we should all take that under advisement. Assistant Principal Tenor applied for a Rise Vermont grant, which was awarded in the amount of $1,500. So we need, could I please have a motion to accept that grant?
So moved.
Thank you, Jackie Prue. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Meredith. Any discussion about accepting that grant?
No, I just think it's a wonderful idea. Mindfulness.
That's great.
It's such a great thing to learn.
Very good. So all those in favor of accepting that $1,500 grant, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes, and we'd like to ask Principal Cawley to extend our thanks to Assistant Principal Tenor, please, for applying for that grant. That's great. And also, a very kind member of the community wants to donate $1,000 to the Molly Stark Art Program. And I believe her name is Dr. Jackie Kelly, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Kelly, we'll say. So could I please have a motion to accept the $1,000 gift? Thank you, Meredith. Could I have a second, please? We're going to say, I think I heard Shayla down there. Second. Any discussion? It's actually Dr. Kelly, I think. That's how it's pronounced. So thank you. Any discussion on that?
Thank you very much. That was very kind of you.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of accepting the $1,000 gift for the Molly Stark Art Program, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes. And thank you very much, Dr. Kelly, for that kind gift.
Thank you.
Moving on to number 4, facilities. We'll turn this over to either Ms. Gordon or to Mr. Prue if you have anything, any specific things to be noted for the facilities.
I don't actually have anything.
Winter's going good, Jackie and everything.
Great.
That's good.
Those are
I
all
hope
good
so.
things.
What about tomorrow morning's weather, Jerry?
You're gonna have snow.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
1:30. That's the question, always. Is it enough?
I needed my children home for another day.
Yeah.
No, it's supposed to melt. It's
So-
gonna be 42 in the afternoon. We will have school, I just want to say.
So moving on to agenda item 5, policies. We need to warn policy 5016, which is proficiency-based graduation requirements. And sure, Jackie Kelly.
I would not like to warn it at this time because I think it needs a change. Lines, starting at line 11, 12, okay? Where it says, these graduation requirements will ensure that all students provide evidence that they have achieved the established learning standards and acquired the knowledge, skills, and work habits that will prepare them for post-secondary education and 21st century careers. I would like to amend it to where it says and or some way which it implies that not all children will go to post-secondary education. Some of them will go on to trade schools, and some of them will go on to other types of schools. So maybe just the word or.
So are you making a motion that we send this back to the policy committee?
Correct.
Okay. So as I understand it, there's a motion on the floor to send policy number 5016 back to the policy committee and ask that they change the and on line 12 to an and or.
Or another possibility, just delete post-secondary education and the word and just say, we'll prepare them for 21st century careers.
So which of the two would you like in your motion?
The second.
Okay, so the motion then is to send this back to the policy committee, deleting the words post-secondary education from line 12.
And.
So post-secondary education and from line 12.
There's some discussion on this.
Is there a second for that, first of all? Going once, going twice. So there is no second for that motion, so it's removed.
We can warn this and send back our recommendations. We don't, because we're not adopting it.
Right.
Right.
So do both. That's what you're saying.
I would warn it with a recommendation.
Data.
That is.
Can't trade schools be considered a secondary education?
Well,
Are we necessarily saying that that's not considered that by that statement?
it's implying that everybody will go to post-secondary education. It doesn't imply that most people, many students will not.
And I suppose I disagree with that reading of it.
Yeah, I didn't take it that way personally.
It says it'll prepare them. It doesn't say that they
have to go.
Prepare them for post-secondary education, followed by 21st century careers. That would be an implication that every kid needs to go to college. But I don't read that like that. I read this as
It says prepare
these
them.
are items on the menu.
So that they're preparing them for that education if they choose to go.
Not everybody can get prepared for that type of education.
I guess I don't read it
It's
as
a
being
mis-
exclusionary.
Oh, that's
at all.
true.
I see it's
It's just a mistake to imply that everybody will go on to college.
But I completely agree with you. But I agree with Chris. I didn't take it that that's what that was implying, personally.
I agree.
I think it was just saying that the proficiency-based grading, the diploma prepares them for that if that is their path in the future.
21st.
Well, we're talking about personalized learning, and not all personalized learning agendas happen to be at college.
But it says and 21st century careers. And 21st century
So
careers
it's
does
both.
not have to be
It implies
post-sec-
both. The wording says both.
So you're saying and or.
So I believe Jackie Puri, you were the last one to make a motion to warn this with a recommendation. So what is your recommendation specifically?
To change the wording on line 12 to be and or 21st century
Thank you. So
careers.
the motion on the floor right now is to warn policy 5016 with a recommendation to the policy committee to change the word and on line 12 to an and/or. Do I have that?
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm fine with
Okay,
that.
so we have the first of Jackie Puri. Do we have a second, please?
Second.
We'll call it for Merity. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of warning 5016?
So we're still warning it, we're just warning it with recommendations.
Yep. So all in favor of warning 5016 with the recommendation of the policy committee to change and on line 12 to and/or, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes. So it is warned of that, and I'll reach out to Leon and let him know that. Okay. So next item for under policies is the adoption of policy 7100. So this is board member education, and there was a long conversation on this at the policy committee meeting. Line 10 originally, the way it was warned, the way it was warned, line 10 read, individual board members will take advantage of opportunities, ... At the last policy committee meeting, that will was changed to can. And it was a representation by one of the schools that was one of the districts that was represented, stating that that board would not approve this policy with will in there, stating that it was unenforceable. We should not be holding board members essentially responsible for doing these things when board members are already giving of themselves so much to be board members. The language was changed from will to can, but the objection at that point was, if you changing the will to can makes the application of this policy optional, and board member education is already optional, given the state of our policy. So the objection to that point was that by changing will to can, you remove any sort of teeth this might have. I guess to summarize, some districts felt that the original wording was too constricting, and that now other boards feel that this language is too free and loose.
I don't think it says anything, to tell you the truth. I reread it and
It's too
why
much.
have it?
Yeah,
I delete the whole thing.
Granted that we do volunteer our time, basically, it is responsible. If you're going to be a board member, you have to be able to learn all these different things. You can't be on a board and not learn these things. You can't be effective.
Make decisions with taxpayers' money without.
Right. And, it's a difficult thing because this has no teeth in it whatsoever. But I don't know how you would mandate it, because I really think that as a board member, you should be going to every training that you can manage to go to, but essentially, we're almost entirely unpaid at that point. So
We
mileage.
are unpaid.
No, I mean, they're covering mileage and things like that, but, basically you're unpaid because you're taking off time from work to do it. I like how the VSBA has been doing the webinars, because I can at least have that running.
Yes.
And I can be working on my laptop and be also attending a webinar simultaneously. And I really think there should be something that says that if you're a board member, you should have some education in the area, because I'm not an educator or administrator. That's my only opportunity to learn more about this area.
Right, and the will and the can don't make it.
Yeah.
It needs to be something like, it is highly suggested that in order to be an effective member of the board, board members will or could take several classes with the VSBD, or be,
It's
I don't
going to
wanna
be
say
extremely
enlightened, but-
important. It's going to be extremely important when you have a board taking care of all the elementary schools.
Because one of the assets of having a cross-section of the population on our board is you can pick from everybody's knowledge base within the board, and you can use that collectively. But, when it comes time to do budgets and things like that, I have no experience in that area. I have to take a class to learn how to do that. I don't know. I think the policy should be reviewed and somehow have teeth in it. That if you accept a board position, you are committed to X amount of hours per year or something. I don't know how you would frame that.
well, you could,
But they would have to be
Possibly.
accessible. They can't be in Waterbury.
but you could possibly have a session before, some meetings.
Do what before the meeting? I'm sorry.
Trainings.
Trainings before the meetings.
We've got people commuting an hour who've haven't had dinner, who have kids at home that are going to bed without a parent at home.
Then you
That's a
do it
lot
in-
for some of us. The webinars for me have been good, but then there's also got to be a way, unfortunately, probably on the superintendent to track us and see, did Meredith Capella put in her 8 hours this year? I think like CEUs, I think it should be tracked.
The problem that you have is some members of the policy committee feel like putting language in that's unenforceable is.
Right? It's a waste.
Do you do it?
That's
And it's similar to, there is statute in Vermont about superintendents and board chairs have to go to 8 hours of annual training. Some board chairs do, some those board chairs don't. Some superintendents do and some don't. It's one of those that, but there's no repercussions to that if they don't. And part of the reason is the only person who can remove a board member, whether they get trained or not, is the voters. So you can't create a policy that would take something away from a board member who didn't attend that training. I understand the frustration with it, but and Jackie's right, it's a weak policy, but
really
it's weak
is.
because there really is nothing you can do to a board member. You can't say, well, if you don't do this training, you can't be the chair, or you won't
Yeah.
get your stipend, or you
Yeah.
can't do that. Only the voters can.
I should also add there was another bullet point added that diversity and equity awareness is an area in which board members can be trained according to this policy. So it's up to us whether or not we want to adopt it.
It
So-
seems like a waste.
So I will say these words. Is there any motion to adopt this? And if there's a silence following it, then I'll...
We can make a motion, we can second, and we can all vote against it. That,
We can. Do we?
That'll be in the minutes.
Do we need to do that if, hey, take it away, if that's what you'd like to do.
I vote that we adopt,
Step back, explain what you're going to do.
we're gonna vote that we
Because I'm
adopt,
fine with the way it's worded.
policy 7100. Somebody might second it. If they second it, then we'll vote. And if the majority votes no, then we didn't adopt it. But
So-
at least it'll be on record that this board voted not to
So moved.
adopt it.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to adopt 7100 as presented now. First and second, any further discussion?
My only thing is, I don't think it's hurting anything.
Yeah, to have it.
Personally, to have it, it's not, so I'm not necessarily gonna vote against it, because I don't think it's doing anything one way or the other, so.
Certainly not doing any harm.
It's not doing any harm, at least we have something saying that education should happen, whether it's, because, I mean, whether people follow through with it, at least we're putting it in our policies that it's something that we should be doing.
What you inspire the board member.
Well, I think what it's saying is that they can do it. I don't think it is saying they should do it.
Right.
It's that they can do it.
And
It's all changed to can.
can, should, will.
Okay.
So there's any...
I
Consider
vote
loosely.
to modify it to saying should.
And I vote to modify it to say. it's-
Wait a
Well,
minute.
well, hang on.
I'm just kidding.
Withdraw your other
I was
motion.
literally not.
So we have a motion on the floor, with a first and a second to adopt it as it is written. Any further discussion? So all those in favor of adopting 7100 as published, please signify by saying aye. With the raise of your hands and hold them up high, please. One, two, three, four. All those opposed? Any abstentions? No, there are none. So with a 4-2 vote, it passes. We have adopted 7100. All right, so our next agenda item is number 6, the sidewalk update for Mr. Dan Monks.
Okay, I assume the sidewalk update is the Applegate Pathway
Yes, please.
Boardwalk project. And I will reiterate what I stated last time and give you an update where we are now. So as you will recall, this project would connect Applegate and Willowbrook and allow for kids from Applegate to walk safely to school, to the Molly Stark School. The project was supported by several entities, including very generously by this board, by the hospital, by Whipsaw Kill Preservation Society, by the town, and by others, and I know I've forgotten some, so I apologize, but there are many entities that have pledged support for the matching funds that were necessary to build this project. Unfortunately, last year, we did go out to bid, and the bids came in about 3 times higher than the engineer's estimate, which unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that happen in the last several months. So the decision was made to take a really close look at the design and see if there's any way to save, to value engineer the project without losing losing sight of the purpose of the project, which is to provide safe transportation for kids from Applegate to access the school. I expect that re-engineered project will be submitted to the Agency of Transportation for their review and approval by mid-January, until no later than January 18th. Then V-Trans will they take however long they take, but we're asking them to act as quickly as possible. We would like to have it out to bid by February so that we can have a bid due in March, and at that point, we'll know whether or not we can proceed with a spring/summer construction. The backup is, unfortunately, if the bids come in high again, we will seek additional funds from V-Trans, and we'll put the project off at least a year. And at that point, we'll have to talk to the funders about whether they want their money to go back to them until the project it receives additional funds, or if they'll want us to hold those funds moving forward. So that is our timetable. We would hope to have a decision, a no-go decision by the end of March.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Dan, how much does it cost to put in, like, a sidewalk?
Significantly higher.
Is it?
Yeah, that's what we looked at. And it also is longer.
Well, I know it'd be longer, but...
The reason it's so high, Jackie, is because there's such a drop-off, a significant amount of fill. There's also permitting issues. So, unfortunately, the lowest cost option became significantly higher than expected. But they're making changes like decreasing the amount of boardwalk, which is more expensive than the pathway, and decreasing the cost of the railings and those sorts of things. The lighting will remain because we think it's an important safety issue. Some folks had thought that was going to be removed. It is not. There will be lighting on the pathway because we know that it gets dark early in the winter.
Yeah.
And it will be maintained in the winter as well. So March is the earliest we'll know whether or not we can proceed.
Okay, thank you for that. So moving on to educational matters. So we have our building principals here. Hello. And the floor is yours.
Edie Dunn is going to speak for us as three principals. We've had 12 days of learning since our last board meeting.
Don't take away my thoughts.
This has created a report.
Our report is really very short and sweet, which will make all of you happy, as Donna pointed out. 12 days since we last met with you to be in session for school, but we have an update on lots that's happening in all three schools. And I think the big piece that we want to emphasize is that we're going to really miss this BSD unity because we've worked so well together. We know we're going to be enlarging our scope of working with others. So after 12 days of learning, right now academically we're planning for what we would call our benchmarking in academics for reading, math, and also for social emotional learning. This is a really important time in our work together so that we can actually measure the progress as incrementally small or as large as it might be. We'll be using MAPS and FastBridge for reading and math, and the student risk screening scale for the social emotional growth. And we have benchmarking pieces that we can look at across the board, both grade-wise and individual student-wise. Teachers and interventionists have created their schedule and are for benchmarking and are ready to start on Monday in most of our schools. We'll be meeting with the Hill Literacy team the following week, and we're eager to get started because this is a turning point for our work that started in August. At this point in the year, we should be able to see which students have moved, what percentage of students who have had interventions in our schools have made progress, and really monitor our investment in that process. In addition to that, Molly Stark hosted a great crowd for the let's see what it's called, the Melton, the snowman performance. Melton, the snowman performance, which was the winter band and chorus. And there was standing room only, which is always great to report on. The Monument Chorus and Molly Stark and Monument Band performed, as well as at Bennington Elementary, we did the same, and I have to say it was one of the greatest turnouts that I've seen since I've been there, which is really great. So we're looking forward to more work together, and looking forward to reporting out to you in February about some major successes.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions for our building principals? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Superintendent Culkeen, we'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. I want to talk to you about January 15th. Why is everybody laughing? So, what this board needs to decide is whether you want to attempt to amend the Articles of Agreement, the default Articles of Agreement. And it's a tight timeline, so why I'm asking, here's the process as I understand it. So we're going to have an organizational board meeting on the 15th, organizational meeting, where the transition board will get sworn in along with some other details. I have a press release here that will be going out Friday. We've just sent it to our attorney to review, make sure that we have all the legal points correct, and then Derek Carson, the SVSU Public Information Coordinator, will be helping us promote this meeting as much as possible to get people there for 5:30 on January 15th at the middle school cafeteria. So at that meeting, as you're aware from the emails I sent you, from the floor will be elected a treasurer, clerk, and moderator for the new board. And those are just the initial ones. And going forward, they'll serve for 1 year, and going forward, then they'll be elected just like they are for our existing boards now. The Secretary of Education will be there to open the meeting, or their designee. Most likely it'll be a designee. So following that meeting, that night, we will warn, we haven't warned this yet, we'll wait until we get a little bit closer, we will warn the first meeting of the transitional board. And that they'll meet that night, hopefully. And because they have a very short window to do their work. If they want to amend the article, the default Articles of Agreement, it has to be done by the 28th of February. It has to be done by ballot vote. And that vote has to be warned for at least 30 days, which effectively gives you to the 28th of January. 28th of February is a Thursday. No one really runs votes on a Thursday. So 26th of February is a Tuesday. So by January 26th, the board would pretty much have to do their work. What would be the interest of Bennington for changing in the default Articles of Agreement? It would be board governance and board makeup. As you know, Bennington gets 2 seats. Shaftesbury, Pownell, Woodford also gets 2 seats. Any 2 boards of the current boards can call for a study committee, another Act 46 study committee, to start looking at whether they want to do attempt to change the articles. And I want to point out that if you don't change it by the 28th, all is not lost. It just means that you're going to operate next year with 2, 2, 2, and 2. The new transitional board, well, not the transitional board, but when the elected board comes on board, they can always warn a vote. Any board has a right to warn a vote of the public to come in and decide whether they want to change the makeup of the board or the governance of the board. So if you don't do it by the 28th, the opportunity is not lost. It's just you're going to operate under those draft articles, those default articles for your first year of operation, or not you, the new Southwest Vermont Union Elementary School District. First order of business should be to change that name. So I will tell you that earlier tonight, Woodford voted to accept the default articles as is. So if you voted tonight that you wanted to form an advisory committee, one of those 2 other boards are going to have to vote to do it. Neither one of them is scheduled to meet before the meeting on the 15th. So we wouldn't have an advisory board in place, because why we'd like try and why we want to try and get one in place before the 15th is so maybe that they could do some work so that they present to the new transitional board, here's some language changes we would like in the default articles. So if you did vote tonight that you want to pursue the idea of an advisory board, then I would approach the chairs of the 2 other boards and see if they wanted to hold a special meeting prior to the 15th to see if another board wants to sign on, because you can move forward with 2 of the 4 boards. You can move forward with it, with an advisory committee to move forward. And a couple other cautions. The joint budget that, Renee gave you a quick draft at, if we don't alter the default articles and save that for another day, we have a good chance of, and this transitional board will just work on budget, and maybe we can get a budget warned by, what's your date, January 30th, Renee, or something?
February 2nd.
February 2nd, so that we could do it at the traditional March town meeting. And at that same time would probably be electing the permanent, or the, what's called the initial members of the Southwest Vermont Union Elementary Board. If the transitional board, because remember, the advisory board that you form is then going to advise the transitional board, and is still subject to the vote of the transitional board whether they want to change that. If you do alter, and the transitional board does want to alter that, it will delay the vote on the budget, and we're probably looking at 3 ballot votes this winter and spring. That by February 28th, there'd have to be a ballot vote in the 4 communities about changing the draft articles. The March town meeting vote on the MAU budget would still go forward. And then somewhere in April, early May, there would be a vote on, in those 4 towns, on the new elementary budget. So we know that, attendance at votes is usually, it's not as desirable as we'd like to see, and then we're going to spread it out over 3. I wanted you, I feel that it probably is the desire of this board, not to speak for you, that you would like to see more members on the transitional and initial board for Bennington. Just want you to know what you're up against. Has to be done by the 28th, and you got to get other people to go along with you too.
222, isn't it 8?
8, yeah. Woodford 2, Pownell 2, U 2, Shasbury
Usually
2.
want to have a...
You would usually want an odd number.
An odd number, right?
Yeah, that seems to be,
And they'll make sure they vote that odd number
yeah.
as chair, so that person doesn't vote.
The chair can opt to be the tiebreaker. So in that case, the chair can opt to be a person that generally doesn't vote and only votes in the case of
So that would be determined at one of the tasks of the organizational board is they vote what are they going to follow, like Robert's Rules of Order for how they run their meetings, which would address how that would happen. Yeah. So I mean, just to refresh everybody's memory, when we did a study committee before, our articles of agreement recommended a hybrid board similar to how MAU's board is, which means that there are protected seats in each town that everybody in all 4 towns vote on those. But it was 4 for Bennington, 2 for Shasbury, 2 for Pownell, and 1 for Woodford. So.
Which is our odd number.
Which was your odd number. But the default Articles of Agreement, which came to us from the Secretary of Education and then approved by the State Board of Education, is what I described. So if you vote that you want to pursue creation of an advisory committee on board governance, then I would try and get another board to hold a meeting before the 15th. And it doesn't mean that and say that doesn't happen, the first article discussed at that meeting on the 15th, a Bennington board member could bring up and say, I want to discuss this, or at a subsequent meeting, but again, the clock is ticking.
If we don't vote on the budget on town meeting day,
Yeah.
you couldn't have this vote Oh, the public on how many board members are gonna be, the articles of agreement at the same time you do the budget?
No,
Later on?
because the legislature has said that February 28th is sunset. I cameras are running.
I just said who.
Yeah. So, yeah, for this one, I think it's because they just want to get everything up and running because we have to be operational by July 1, so they've put a deadline on there. But considering that the state plan came out November 30th, and then any changes have to be voted on by February 28th, knowing full well that it has to be warned for at least 30, no more than 45 days, wasn't a lot of time. Throw in a couple of holidays.
Your major holidays.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why it's got to be. Yeah, it's not. We didn't pick the 28th. That's part of the law.
Jim, you had said that any current board can ask for an can ask for a study committee, another Act 46 study committee.
Yeah.
Do we have to have another study committee before we before somebody makes a motion to?
Yeah, because say that we don't do it tonight, or you do it, and you don't get another board by the 15th to agree to do it. But at that meeting on the 15th, there's a majority of members who want to form it. It still has to be an advisory committee that does it and then holds a public forum.
Okay.
Yeah, and takes public comment
Yeah.
on changing it and then warns it.
So can you describe in a little bit more detail the process to informing an advisory committee? Is it my understanding that BSD needs to be part of that because we were the required board for the merger, and then we have one of our.
I know. My understanding that type of thing doesn't apply. This is like, this is in statute that any two boards can form an advisory committee. So, and we're four. So according to my discussions with our attorney, Steve Stitzel, was that any two boards could do this and warn a study committee, advisory committee to come up with a plan. Yeah.
And I think it comes down to us since we're,
So if we were to create an advisory committee, we're going to give them a specific task.
Right, and you can't create it by yourself. One of the other boards has to agree.
And the landscape has changed with the one board that actually, Woodford, I'm surprised, was that unanimous?
Yes.
Oh, I'm really surprised. Because their board member was all for the hybrid.
Yeah, so they did not vote, the default articles is a hybrid model.
right.
No, they said the Mount Anthony hybrid.
Right, so they did not vote to not form an advisory committee. They voted to accept the draft articles of agreement as written.
Of course.
Which,
As written by the AOE.
the Secretary of Education.
Yeah.
The Secretary's plan as presented to the Age of Education.
And Shaftesbury doesn't have the same board members they had on the study committee that agreed to the Mount Anthony model.
So I guess the best thing that I can say is that this
The
can
model's not going to change.
happen at any time. If it doesn't happen by the 28th, it's not all done. It can happen, once the initial board is in place, they can.
Once the initial board is in place, then you're going to have the full conglomerate of people for the advisory. It wouldn't just be BSD and one more board.
Well, once the initial board or once the transition board?
Once, I'm losing track of the name of the new boards. Once the board, the new one, the new
The elementary one.
Thank you, whatever we're calling that. Once that one's in place and we want to go back and try to revamp structure, we're not going to be able to do it with just DSD and one other board.
You're going to have to have majority.
do it as a conglomerate.
That
It's going to be
board.
even more difficult
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
do it that further down the road.
I agree.
So in order to have choice, we have to propose and vote on
An advisory now.
an advisory
So
model.
I don't, I shouldn't even mention this because I don't feel qualified to say, but maybe someone else can. I believe there are other avenues besides like that board can't apply. I believe a citizen's petition can also call for it, yeah. But
That's the likely route to happen, if it's going to happen at all.
It's gonna happen in Bennington.
Right,
Because
that's, and
we're
that's,
really crunched for time.
yeah. So
I mean,
if what happened, like say we don't get an advisory committee now and it doesn't happen by the 28th.
Right.
And your concern is now you got a board of 8, which Bennington only has 2 on it. How are you going to ever get a majority
We're not.
vote?
It's
I
not in
believe
their
a
best
citizen's
interest at
petition
that
can
point.
do it, but we would have to get legal counsel on that.
It won't be in their best interest. The only time we can do it, I think, and have any level of success is when we know.
But I was at a Shaftesbury board meeting, I don't, speak for Shaftesbury and things, board members shift and change, but they were a board that felt when the draft articles, default articles came out, they said at a board meeting that they didn't feel that was fair. And they were part of that when we wrote our response that it should be 4, 2, 2, and 2. Shaftesbury was on board with that, so I don't, but things change,
That's only 4
Can we
anyway.
propose to Shaftesbury that we meet together?
Well, that's what the advisory
Advisory
committee
would
would
be.
It's the
be.
advisory.
Right.
That's if they vote
Meeting every
to
Yeah.
partake in the advisory, form the
So you
advisory.
you also have to vote your representative, if you vote you want to form an advisory committee, then you would have to vote your representatives to it, and
Right.
and then
So I'd
one
like
other
to make a
board would have to do
motion.
the same.
I agree, I'm with you.
I'd like to make a motion that we form an advisory committee?
Yes,
I
Yes.
second it.
to look over the draft articles of agreement, or the default articles of agreement.
So the motion on the table, and Jim, you can tell me if this satisfies what's required. So there's a motion on the table that the BSD and a one other to be identified district form an advisory committee to advise the transition SWVUESD board as to the representational model in the default articles of agreements.
Yeah.
Does that satisfy what you need? Does that sound like what you just moved?
Yes.
Is there a second to
I
Dr.
did- I
Kelly's
second.
motion? Thank you, Chayla. Any further discussion for this?
Just to clarify, even if we are successful in forming this advisory committee, they still need to convince the transitional board to warn a vote.
Correct.
Yeah, that I'm not 100%, I will have to look at that a little bit more, because I'm trying to think back when we did our other advisory committees. The advisory committee came back and they did the plan, and that was part of the problem, was that some of the boards then felt left out, because the advisory committee had the authority to move forward. So I'd have
But
to
then we
check.
remember we called the round robin
Yeah, yeah.
to warn it.
Yeah, we did call around with that. So everybody had a vote on what we were submitting.
And does anyone recall how many seats Bennington had on the advisory committee before?
We
We had
had, it
3.
was Dan, myself,
No,
and
you weren't on the advisory, you're on.
I was on the
formal.
last one, the
That-
Act
you were on a
46.
formal
Are you
one.
talking about the Act 46 committee, the one that we actually submitted the things that were voted on?
Yes.
It was Dan, myself, Don, and
So you
Amy
had,
Dobson.
Amy
so you
Dobson.
had 2 community members.
Two community
Yeah.
ca-
So it's not practical that you're gonna have community members
At this
time. So, but, how big is this committee?
Or seven.
So
Seven.
4 would be a majority. So, but Steve Stitzel had advised me that your representation should look, similar to what it was on your previous advisory committee, but that committee would.
can't.
Yeah, you can't, no, because you didn't have 4 board members. So, I guess what we could say is that I'll contact the other chairs, and if one of them agrees to hold a emergency meeting a special meeting to see whether they want to form an advisory committee, and somebody goes along, we could go back and have an emergency meeting here and elect 2 unless you want to do.
I prefer to do it tonight. Well, first of all, we still have a motion on the floor right now to form this advisory committee. Richard, you have what the motion is, right? There's no need for me to say that again. Any further discussion on the motion on the table, on the floor rather? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the motion carries. I would like us to, tonight, elect 3 representatives from the BSD to sit on this advisory committee should it actually be formed.
I apologize, but tell me what the timeline is again, so I know how many meetings it would be, because I would like to be in it, but I want to know what I'm committed to, because it's January.
It's going to be like.
The transition board
it's
meets
gonna
the
be-
be
15th.
January.
Yeah, so,
It's basically January.
January,
I don't
yeah.
want to do it.
I mean, I think it makes sense for the two people, for at
Yes.
least the two people who are going to be on the transition committee
Okay.
to be on it anyway, which is the clerk Jackie and
That's not
me as
considered,
chair.
that's not considered a conflict or anything?
Shoot, no.
Why do double duty?
If somebody feels strongly,
I don't want to
So-
be considered.
If
mean,
you're
I would
looking for
do
a
it too.
third, I'll do it.
So I would nominate Jackie Prue, Meredith Capella, and Chris Murphy to be the three reps from the BSD onto the advisory committee.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Chair Lindette. So any discussion about that? Hearing none, all those in favor of electing the three of us, Jackie Prue, Meredith Capella, and Chris Murphy to represent the BSD on the advisory committee for the transitional board.
To amend the
Thank you, to amend the
governance
articles
of
of
the
agreement.
articles.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good, so that's the three of us.
I will be in contact with both the other boards and see if they would consider doing a special meeting to discuss this matter.
Thank you. So we had previously talked about some behavioral data being shared tonight, but we're not ready to do that. So that's not going to happen tonight.
The 12 days of education,
Yes, 12 days.
vacation kind of got in the way, so on that.
So that just brings us to the chair's report.
Can we back up? When can
Yep.
we expect that to be shared? The- When could behavioral data be shared?
So we talked in November about having, yeah,
Because what drove those,
Swiss data,
the
yes.
request for those positions, yeah.
I think that our thoughts about that were twofold. We have Swiss data that runs all year round. However, I think the alignment of the input of the data among schools was the question that we were working on. And then with support of Melissa Senecal, she is actually working with all the schools because you want to make sure that we're inputting in the same fashion regarding minor and major referrals because we want the data to be true to the reflection of behaviors. So we're still working on that.
So if benchmarking, MAP scores, all of those things are happening in January, would it be realistic to have kind of a full picture in February of this, of the benchmark data, the MAPS data, and the achievement data with the behavioral data?
The window is because each school there's it's actually a large window, so we're starting ours and through BSD schools, but I'm not quite sure how long
you hold it.
last can look right now.
Also what Donna was talking about regarding how that is entered, and they're working on aligning major minors. And you add on top of that, the learning about differences between trauma-informed stress behaviors and other behaviors. So it's more complex than just looking at numbers and data. So I think we really need to have some discussion around that with Melissa and each of the PBIS coordinators.
and often, Jody, Chip just reminded me, often we don't meet in February.
What do you mean? We always have.
Not last year, not the year before that.
When the
So,
budget was set, we didn't meet.
well, whether we should be or shouldn't be, we had. So, can we plan for March? Yes.
So our window should be done for, I would think that March would be appropriate. And then I think that gives us an opportunity to make sure that we can combine all our data. We have a good sense of the input and being accurate throughout the three BSD schools. And I think that would be fun.
To the
That
March
would be
meeting.
a great goal, March. And then we would have a combination. We'd have Fast Bridge, we'd have MAP data, we'd have the SRSS, and also our Swiss.
I think that'd be a really valuable snapshot for
Yeah.
the boards to see within the schools.
Well, I want to go back to what you started with. We're asking, and I fully support, a behavior analyst, 2 teachers, a para-educator for each one of these. And we're not giving the public a clear idea why we need, except that this board knows that we need it. So we asked for these figures back in October.
October, November.
October and November, and I think that we have a duty to educate the public on what our teachers are actually having to deal with in their classrooms.
We presented this report last month on behavior.
Yeah. So what percentage of children had zero referral, what percentage of children, numbers of children that had 0 to 20 and above 20. So the children we're building this program around are the children above 20 referrals.
You might want to talk to the mic if you're...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So I think if we could help explain to the public and not right now at this meeting, but because I understand what a referral means, but explaining to the public about a minor referral, a major referral, and just really giving them an accurate snapshot of the needs, because I'm in line with Jackie in that asking for these intensive supports is exactly what we need, but people are not aware of our needs in our schools. If they don't have children in the schools, they're not aware at all.
Or if they don't have children that have those,
We could do
need those resources.
So, I mean, to give you a little context, in that chart that we handed out last month, when you talk about a child, and last month it was essentially November, we've been in school for less than 3 full months. To have more than 24 referrals in 3 months of school for an individual child means that child needs a lot of additional support and a lot of additional attention. So just to give you a little context, major or minor, just the sheer number of the types of referrals, and then we can disaggregate from there. But you think about just one referral, you take administrator time, you take teacher time away for that child, you take other learners' time away from attending to their learning because that child needs additional attention in order to be safe and learn at school. So just the sheer number of referrals.
Thank you, Kate. And I feel like when we look at data, we should just kind of look side by side about the behaviors, and because that is always in front of the academics are the behaviors.
And I think it will be a nice clarification, because at the time that data came out, we had some schools who imported our minor and majors, so it really wasn't it wasn't really disaggregated correctly. If you want to look at the schools across, now we're aligning, so you'll be able to see December, January, February. We'll do a presentation with all the data, including Bass Bridge and SRSS and SWIS.
That'll be very helpful.
I think it would be helpful.
It's just the problem with people that have never had, they have an idea that schools are, you go to school and you learn arithmetic and science and social studies, and they don't know about, and back when they went to school, there was segregation of certain students with developmental disabilities. They don't understand what they don't even realize what some teachers and other students have to deal with nowadays with inclusion and the drug epidemic, that's what I'm going to put it to, and the homelessness of what some of these students that are coming to school and what we have to deal with, and why. I'm not going to blame all the scores on that, but I think that's part of the reasons why our scores don't go up the way we want them to, as much as we want them to.
Home consistency.
And home consistency. You've done a great job last year. I'm not saying you didn't. I mean, you mentioned major benchmarks, but, every child should be at that top level.
9%
That's all. I'm done with my diatribe.
Yeah. Jim, just to clarify a little bit of this board going forward, now that we have the transitional board, can you kind of clarify our role? Will there be we have a town meeting day? I mean, doesn't seem like we don't have a budget.
No.
Just kind of, at least for my edification, what's our role going forward to close out this board's tenure?
Well, it's not, I don't know if it's my role to tell boards what they should do and should not do,
But
but
what is our authority?
your authority remains until June 30th, and you actually may still have to meet after that date, because you may have a warrant that still needs to be signed, and could be something like an audit comes back to you. So the good point is, whose seats are up?
Mine.
Yeah. So,
Jackie's and Jackie.
you know, I would encourage you to run again and, you know, fill out, because the board still has to function until the 30th. It still needs to get a quorum to the 30th. You may find, you know, your meeting is going to consist of signing warrants, as far as, because the transitional board will be meeting concurrently. But you still have full authority as a board, so you can discuss any topic that you want, and, you know, this is your forum. But in practical sense, yeah, your role is winding down.
Question. I guess this is for Jackie and for you. Wouldn't you have to run again to serve on the transitional board? Right?
So the...
Continue your clerk's,
Yes.
right?
No,
I thought so.
I think
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would think you would have to, because to remain
But
as
it's
a board
quite
member.
possible that, depending what happens with articles of agreement, it's quite possible that the initial board will be elected by the time your term expires, by the
Correct.
town meeting, yeah.
But if it isn't,
If it isn't, I would say
then I would
that
say Jack.
she would, yeah. I'm
But
not
I
a
guess
legal
my question
expert,
is,
but-
don't you need to start getting the signatures before that
I
decision?
mean, somebody else's term must be up here. too.
Jackie's, both Jackies.
Oh, both Jackies. So, I mean, anybody can run. I mean, it doesn't have to be you two, but I would, you know,
And do people that want to be on the permanent board, the other board, have to be running now too?
once that, well, not right now, but once the transitional board is up and running, then, and once they decide when the transitional board decides that they are going to hold that election, then yes,
So
there will
more
have
than
to be.
likely, though, the SWEU, whatever, that's going to be held for like a November vote, though.
No,
March.
no.
It has to be done.
Could be March.
It has to be done before June
Could be
30th.
March, could be April, as early as March, as late as May.
May.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's got to be done.
yeah, so the transitional
Our
board
voters
could
are
be
gonna be at the
a very
polls.
short window.
Lots this year.
So basically, by the 15th, we'll have an idea of whether we are going to be voting that new board on March. or
Right, if you're not, if the move to amend the draft articles is not gaining any traction, then I would imagine that by the March town meetings, you will be electing what's called the transitional board members. And their terms are staggered by the plan that was given to us by the state. I don't have it in front of me to say, like,
It was 3, 2,
you know,
and 1.
so there'll be
No.
1-year terms, 2-year
Yeah,
terms, and
one-
3-year
1
terms,
year.
so that they rotate
Yes,
and
they-
expire at different years.
Sorry, Jim, is that also being called the transitional board?
No,
No, that's
that's the
the new
initial
board.
The initial board.
Initial board.
The initial board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe I just misheard, but I thought it was another transition.
Transitional,
Yes.
transitional is what's going to meet on the 15th. Well, first it's the organizational meeting, then the transitional board
You need to
meeting.
give us like a graphic with flow.
when you haven't got anything to do,
Yeah.
draw a picture.
No, it would help me too. So, vote early and vote often. I think I'm quoting somebody there, but
Don't leave the polls, just stay right here.
So if we do hold a vote in March, when would those running for that initial board have to put in their,
Petitions?
By the end of the year.
Petitions have to be in by January 28th.
around the same time we would be doing the
It's going to be a
warning? Right.
yeah, because, and like, we're going to have, and he's been working with the town clerks, and the other, surprise to us on this is on the 15th, all 4 town clerks or their appointees need to be there with voter lists to check off who's coming in on the 15th.
Oh,
They all know that.
Yeah. So,
that's gonna be something.
Will actually show up though.
Yeah.
It might not actually be.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what attendance was like that night. And then some people have asked me, why the middle school. We felt it was a neutral location. It's owned by all 4 of the communities. It's not any one town school. It's not any one town's fire station. And it has a pretty large capacity, it has large parking, so.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Jim. Nothing for the chair's report that we haven't already discussed tonight. So agenda item 10, the FYI, we have the student enrollment, which will be posted, and the budget status report, which is up. So, if there's nothing else, could I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting, please?
So moved.
Before we do that, will we be meeting in February or to be determined?
To be determined. Okay. Thank you. So we have a motion to adjourn. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Jayla. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Pray for warm temperatures tomorrow morning.